Hey everyone, this is Devin Moreno, and today I wanted to go ahead and talk about the real estate implications of Biden winning the presidency of the United States. So, as many of you know, Biden is proposing a lot of different changes that are going to change taxes, going to probably impact stimulus, he's going to impact a lot of different programs, all revolving around real estate. And as you all know, I am an investor in Baltimore City, kind of DC area, where I own 6 properties, manage 11 others, and I am heavily into real estate. I'm even becoming a realtor in pretty much this month. I'm working on the exam now. So this whole thing means a lot to me. The fact that Biden won, and so I need to focus on, all right, what changes are coming into play, and many of these changes might impact you as well. So I'm going to go into all of the changes in basically 3 categories. We're going to talk about some of the tax changes that he's making. We're going to talk about stimulus and some of the real estate programs he's going to impact. Also, I'm only going to talk about this from the perspective of myself, like a lower end investor, kind of a young investor. I'm not some commercial person. I don't have massive apartment complexes, nothing like that. So a lot of the information about how this impacts me probably is going to be how you relate to it as well. Many of you who are newer investors getting your first deal. So before we go into it, we have to acknowledge one fact of the fact that, yes, Biden won the presidency, but as of right now, me filming this here on November 8th, the Senate is actually split 48 to 48, and there are still 4 states that need to be counted, and most all of them, 3 of them especially, are looking like they're going to favor the Republicans. So therefore, the Senate is expected to be controlled by the Republicans, and therefore they can kind of doorstop a lot that Biden wants to propose. So even though Biden wants to do these things, we don't actually know that he will be able to do all these things. So that is something that I'm going to take into account with a lot of these assessments. And I think you definitely should as well. Of course, once again, this could go a different way, but it looks like we're going to be looking at a majority Republican in the Senate. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about taxes. And I want to cover a really big one, this one you're seeing all over the place, and that is the 1031 exchange. Now, for those of you who don't know or new to real estate, the 1031 exchange is when you get to sell a property and not pay any tax on it. So, of course, there's stipulations to this. What you do is you sell the property, and as long as you buy another like-kind property, usually an investment property for another investment property of equal or higher value, then you no longer have to pay the capital gains rate. So capital gains is 20%. So if you sold a house for $100,000, you generally have to pay $20K right to the government just for that sale. This completely avoids that. Now, why is that important though? The fact is, if you're trying to build those or buy those like $4 million apartment complexes, you're probably not saving your way to doing that. You're more likely going to acquire a series of properties, bulk them all together, and then sell them all to buy that property. And that's how you get people who are able to buy these larger apartment complexes, or at least one way. There's, of course, other ways. Well, the elimination of this means that you would have to pay taxes on all those properties, and you probably could no longer afford that $4 million apartment building you're trying to get. Now, the impact to this is going to be a little bit more wide-reaching than, just simply like some purchases. Transactions in real estate sales, if this gets eliminated, are going to drop dramatically. I mean, some are actually speculating as high as 20% drop in real estate sales. Who is this going to impact? I mean, construction, realtors, obviously myself. Hey, this is a huge impact. It's going to anyone who's in the business of real estate transactions or anything about real estate, even like lawyers. There's even entire brokerages just designed for 1031 exchanges. All of these would take a hit. Not to mention the fact that if real estate transactions are now dropped by that much and your buying power is reduced by that, because remember, now that you have to factor in taxes, you can't technically afford as much house. That means that overall, real estate prices could theoretically drop. If you're noticing lately during this pandemic, interest rates are going down. What does that mean? It means people can buy more house. They can put in larger offers. When people can put in larger offers, prices go up. So now you're going to see the reverse. You can't put as large of an offer, prices go down. Now, the realism of this, however, is probably that it's not really going to happen. Honestly, Biden's not the first president to try to throw away the 1031 exchange. The 1031 exchange, it was made in 1921. It's nearly, as of next year, 100 years old. There's a lot of money in on this, and obviously the economics of this, and a lot of people who would be losing their jobs due to just so many real estate sales not going on, well, maybe not losing jobs, but losing a lot of income. I think this would be too big for Biden to ignore. And then we still have to factor in that Senate majority for the Republicans. Their chances are not going to allow something like this to go through. And considering Congress is the one that makes approvals on fiscal policies like this, it'll be a pretty uphill battle for Biden to even get this through. So I'm not too worried about it. But let's say he managed to somehow get it through. I mean, yes, it just means I simply am not going to be able to sell my properties in order to buy larger properties. But all we do is readjust our strategies. I think, honestly, in this case, we'll be fine. So the next tax change he's making, and I'm going to only talk about the biggest tax changes. I don't want to go through all of them, but it's the SALT tax, or state and local tax. Essentially, Trump, in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, what he did was he made it where you can only use up to $10,000 of your property taxes for your tax deductions. And usually this always applied to, of course, federal tax deductions. So obviously, this hits higher end areas like California and New York a lot harder than some of the like red states where property taxes aren't nearly as high. So now if you can only deduct up to 10K, you're going to run into a serious problem if you live in a place where your houses are like $4 million as the average house. So here, as a Baltimore investor, I never really was too worried about this impact anyway. Most houses, yes, Baltimore has like one of the highest tax rates. Even property taxes in Baltimore are actually higher than that of California. It's got double the property tax rate of DC, but the home values are a lot less. So I never really had to worry about it. However, I do want to invest in the DC area. In fact, I do own one property in the DC area, and property values there are going to be a lot higher. So having this removed is actually something that can benefit me. And I'm pretty sure that anything Trump put into place, Biden probably is going to want to remove it in a very similar way that we saw Trump removing a lot of Obama era stuff. So that's pretty much the two major tax policies as far as real estate is concerned. I mean, there's obviously some changes in the actual capital gains rate that Biden wants to change. Long story short, if you make an income of over $400,000, he's proposing that we essentially get taxed at ordinary income, which is 39.6%. Well, under Biden's plan, it's a little bit less than that right now. Capital gains, though, would be 20%. So it like basically doubles. Now, is this really a problem? This is usually affecting high income earners. I don't make $400,000 a year, so this is something obviously I'm working toward. At this point, only making $250,000 a year, so I'm quite not at that threshold. But if you are someone who's thinking about flipping houses, you can make $400,000 a year pretty quickly if you flip in like the DC region or kind of like general Maryland. You'll make a little bit less in Baltimore on your average flip, but it's still technically possible. So it's something to just watch out for, because every time you flip, that income counts. And sometimes you can make a lot on a single deal just before taxes. So all of these are tax implications that we definitely want to pay attention to. Once again, any tax plan that Biden puts forward has to get through Congress. So not too much to worry about here, but if it happens, I don't think that part will affect me. So now let's go ahead and talk about stimulus, because this is huge. All the lockdowns in general and everything that's been happening under this year have been devastating for a lot of real estate investors. I'm doing pretty okay, but I still have tenants who can't pay their rent. Well, under Biden, we're probably looking at a more generous stimulus proposal. Once again, still having to be approved, but I think in this case, it'll be a lot easier to get these things approved. The country is pretty much on board with the idea that we need more stimulus, but we're probably going to expect a lot more stimulus. Most hopefully are going for the unemployment. As of right now, it dropped back to $300 a week for unemployment. This might increase again, which means tenants can pay rent, and that definitely helps me out quite a bit. Obviously, stimulus checks, not sure if they'll really necessarily get larger, but this, once again, is just a way to help pay off a lot of back rent owed by a lot of tenants. So this can be huge for them. There also are some plans, and this kind of relates to taxes, but that still help tenants, where Biden wants to propose new legislation where if you spend more than 30% of your income on housing, including utilities, then you actually get a tax credit. So this is another thing where that might help people, when they're filing their taxes, tenants who are having trouble with this. So this is something that, Biden has really been put into place. But of course, one thing that can hurt landlords, and this is something I personally could be worried about, is the threat of lockdowns again. If lockdowns happen again, then a lot of people are going to start losing their jobs again. Now, hopefully it's done in a way where, hey, look, we see now what's going on. We see what can happen going forward if we just simply lock down. Maybe a better plan could be put in place where even if people lose their jobs, they're still getting a steady paycheck. But that all remains to be seen. And I don't want to necessarily talk about whether or not this is good or bad for the country or the economics. I just want to talk about it from the perspective of how it impacts me now as an investor. And as of now, yeah, the idea of tenants getting more money is a good thing. Now, the final third category I want to talk about is Section 8. And this is actually going to be big for me in Baltimore City. Section 8 is a coveted program within the city because it means guaranteed rent. And with a lot of volatility of the job market and, unemployment in Baltimore City, I'm personally always going Section 8 whenever I have single-family houses. Of course, I'll do it in apartments too, but most of my rooming houses that I talk about a lot on this channel, I own and manage a lot of rooming houses. That's usually going to be your market tenants. But however, for a single-family home, this is a great safety net where you can have guaranteed income. It's not going to go away. So that means if everything else in your kind of real estate portfolio fails, you always know that that's going to keep you afloat. Well, Biden actually wants to increase Section 8 funding, which is excellent because as of right now, of every 5 people eligible for Section 8, only 1 actually gets funded through the program. The rest are on kind of a waiting status, which means there will be more Section 8 tenants available for us investors to rent to. And this is always encouraging because as of right now, the pool of Section 8 tenants is so small that we're often fighting over them in little ways. And I'll get into that in another video where I talk exclusively about Section 8. Let me know if you in the links in the comments below if you want a video about that. But yeah, this is going to be huge. I think that if you are in Baltimore City like myself, you're definitely going to want to pay attention to any increases in programs like this. Now, there are a lot of other little things that I'm going to really briefly go over. This is kind of like the small stuff that Biden has talked about. Some of them, though, for you may not be that small. So, for instance, the step-up tax basis. If you don't know what that is, what it means essentially is, let's say you inherit a house from your parents, and your parents bought the house at $200,000, and then they give it to you when it's worth $400,000. Well, the very next day after they gave it to you, and by the way, giving it to you specifically if they pass away, so you inherit the house, that next day you decide to sell it. Well, normally, under tax laws, you're supposed to sell it and, it was purchased for $200,000, you're selling for $400,000, you got to pay taxes on that $200,000 in difference. Well, the stepped-up tax basis basically makes the purchase price of the home the value that it was when you inherited it. So now, even though you're selling it for $400,000, your parents bought it for $200,000, you count as having bought it for $400,000, which means you pay 0 tax. This is an incredibly powerful tool for the rich and wealthy, but it's really a generational thing. It allows you to buy a house and pass it on to your children, and they don't really have to worry about all the tax implications, especially if you used a lot of deferment principles, which we talk about a lot on this channel, like depreciation and such. I mean, it would really, really hurt, anyone inheriting a house. Well, Biden wants to get rid of this. My family doesn't own any houses, so I don't have anything to inherit. So I'm not personally worried, but this is something that could affect you. There are a couple other things. Opportunity zones. If you happen to be a person who wants to invest in opportunity zones, there will be more restrictions regarding that. We'll get into that in another video, but just for those of you who actually know what it is. Also, Trump levied a lot of tariffs, I apologize, on Canadian lumber, a lot of supplies from China. All of these things affected construction costs. Everyone noticed, during this pandemic, costs were going up. It was harder to get supplies for things. Well, it didn't help that all these tariffs were in place before the pandemic even hit. Biden wants to remove a lot of those. So what we might be looking at are a lot of lower prices on construction, which makes all of our renovation costs a lot easier. Profits are going to go up. So I'm actually curious on all of your thoughts about everything I'm stating here. Now, obviously, I didn't go into the entire list of things. There are a lot of different zoning regulations and stuff that Biden's going to, touch on that I'll get in future videos. But mainly on these big three: taxes, the 1031 exchange being removed. Is that something you're really worried about? Stimulus. Is this something that you think will really help you with your tenants? And then Section 8. Is that something you think you're going to start getting into, knowing that, hey, there's going to be a larger pool of Section 8 tenants out there? So curious about your thoughts. If you want me to elaborate on any of these, I think I will in future videos, just kind of touch on them, especially if you're curious on how to do them. Let's say they don't go away. Some of you might want to know some of these tax strategies. We definitely talk about it on this channel. So comment below, let me know, and I will talk to you all very soon.